So it's not every day we get to review a custom bike. In this video, I'm going to review a Breadwinner G1, which happens to be Tony's personal bike. Find out what I think about it in this video. Welcome back, Pathless Peddlers, and if you love bikes but don't race and enjoy the supple life, consider subscribing. You have found your people. So if you're not familiar with the brand Breadwinner, it's actually two frame builders, Tony and Ira, who both had well-respected businesses on their own, and they combined forces to form Breadwinner a couple years ago. And the bike I'm reviewing from Breadwinner is the G-Road. Grode? I'm gonna go with G-Road because Grode just sounds weird, which, as the name suggests, is a gravel road bike. I'm actually really stoked to review a custom bike. Like many of you out there who have champagne fantasies but Budweiser budgets, you've always wondered what these custom bikes ride like. With all that said, let's jump into the review of the Breadwinner G-Road. So the Breadwinner G-Road is a custom gravel road bike. There are some set angles, but there's a lot of flexibility in terms of braze-ons, head tube height, top tube length, etc. The bike I rode was Tony's personal bike, and it's roughly around a 54 centimeter equivalent frame. It's decked out with Chris King everything, hubs, headset, bottom bracket, Thompson handlebars, Thompson seat posts. The rims are Stan's Crest. I believe they're the MK3s, and mounted on the wheels are Schwabe G1s in I believe 2 inches. In terms of gearing controls, it's running SRAM Force, 1x hydraulic. For the touch points, it's using a handlebar tape by Fabric, which I found super comfortable. I'm not sure if it's double padded or if there's extra gel beneath the stock tape, but it was a little bit on the chunky side, but nice and perfect for gravel roads. The saddle was also a Fabric saddle. Not quite sure which particular model it was, but it was a nice shape that worked well for me. And like many of the Breadwinner bikes, it comes with a match to paint Silka frame pump. Just adds that extra bit of class and utility. Looking at the frame specifically, the fork is made by Chris Eigelhart, another frame builder based in Portland, Oregon. And it's a segmented design, and you'll notice that it's got all of the mounts. It's got 3-pack mounts, and it's also got mounts for a lowrider. And they're slightly offset to kind of optimize the position of the lowrider rack, or if you're running things like anything cages. It does look a little bit busy, but you can choose either or have both. I think that's the cool part of the custom program. On this particular build, it didn't have a rear rack mount, so it's clearly optimized to go fast road rides, gravel road rides, or light touring with just a load in the front. It may be a rackless seat bag in the back. One of the first things I noticed after building the bike is just how light this bike is. Over the last couple months, I've had a chance to review higher end steel bike, and it's completely redefined what a steel bike feels like and what a steel bike is capable of doing for me. Like many of you, my experience with a steel bike is in the Surly family or the All City family. So that kind of builds kind of a preconception of how heavy a steel bike is and how it rides. But after getting a chance to ride and play with these next level steel bikes, it's really made me reevaluate and reconsider what a nice steel bike feels like and is capable of. On the scales, the bike as shown with 2 water bottle cages, standard run-of-the-mill SPD pedals, and minus the pump, it came in at about 21.8 pounds, and this lightness was totally noticeable on the road, especially climbing. So beyond just the lightness of the steel bike, one of the more interesting qualities that comes out is a springiness. The bike is lively and has a certain amount of give when you put input to the pedals. I love standing and climbing on this bike. It seemed to have that springiness that kind of rebounds your energy. So let's talk a little bit more about the handling. In terms of the front end handling, it felt fairly light and agile. It didn't feel like a boat rudder, but it still also managed to be fairly stable even on rough descent. So it was a good balance of front end responsiveness and stability. The fork itself is pretty compliant, probably not as compliant as the Ritchie Outback, but still provided some shock absorption in the front, and definitely aided by the Schwabe G1 tires. Again, like I said, first time trying these tires, and I'm super impressed. I feel like they're a lot more livelier, a lot more supple than than the WTB Nanos that are stocked on many bikes. So if you have the option, check out those Schwalbe G1s. In terms of the rear, the chainstay length is 430, so it cuts that balance between quickness and stability. And overall, when you couple that with the front end, it just feels like a nicely balanced bike. Whereas some gravel bikes emphasize stability almost to the point of being boring to ride, the G-Road doesn't do that. It's still a fun and playful bike. And I have to admit, one of my reasons for doing all these bike reviews is to hopefully find the next bike I'm gonna purchase. And with the Breadwinner, it is really up there. I love that it has a steel fork. For me, if I'm gonna invest a lot of money, I want a bike that's gonna be like a forever bike. And I like carbon forks, but you know, existentially, I have this doubt that they're gonna break. And it's nice to have this fork by Chris Eigelhart that doesn't weigh a ton, but is super useful, where you can put low riders or you know, anything cages, or ride it naked, and it still rides like a fun and fast bike. So I know the word quiver killer gets thrown out a lot, and for me, I think this bike really fits that bill. If you swap out the G1s with some Compass tires or some, you know, smoother tread 650B tires, the bike will fly. It would make a great all-around endurance road bike for events, for commuting, for light touring. You know, put in some gnarlier tires and you can take it on off-road bike packing adventures or events like Dirty Kansas, Rebecca's Private Idaho. It's a bike that will do lots of things in a fun and lively manner. I think just looking at the bike, you'd be tempted to compare it with the Gorilla Monsoon, but having ridden both, they kind of look the same visually. You know, they can take bigger 650B tires and they've got the mounts and everything, but in terms of riding and handling, they couldn't be further apart. Whereas the Gorilla Monsoon had a oddly super stable front end and just weighed a lot. The Breadwinner weighs about 7 pounds less and is way more responsive and just a lot more light-footed than the Gorilla Monsoon. So what's there to not like about the Breadwinner G-Road? Well, it's not an inexpensive bike. And in this case, I think you get exactly what you pay for. Frame set alone starts at about $2,700. That's without wheels or components or anything. I think this build that I rode in particular, going through their bike builder, probably costs about $7,000 or $8,000. So not a cheap bike. If you have the money, I would totally pull the trigger. I know that the price is expensive, but honestly, after having ridden this bike and compared it to bikes I own personally, you know, Surleys and Salsas and All-City, it's really in a class of its own. And while a lot of those bikes can kind of approximate what this bike might feel like in terms of geometry and tires and all that, it really comes down to tubing and execution. With less expensive mass-produced bikes, and I'm not knocking them because that's what I own, that's what I ride, there's always a compromise. They tend to be overbuilt. So it's really refreshing to ride a bike that has you know, nice light tubing, nice springy tubing, and comes to life beneath you. So that's it. I guess I should start saving my pennies. If you have any questions, leave those in the comments below. And again, if you like this video, consider supporting the channel. This is how I keep the lights on. And until next time, keep the supple side down.